Welcome to the Fortress World. You've only stepped through one door. The Whisper Chronicles is one collection of stories inside a much larger world. A world where whispers become adventures, kingdoms are built on truth, and every journey ultimately points to the king. Some stories are epic. Some are quiet. Some are written for children. Others for dreamers. All of them are written with one purpose: to help you encounter Jesus through unforgettable stories. So journey through the Fortress World. We've got the Whisper Chronicles. We've got the Royal Identity series. Those are stories for daughters of the King learning who they always were meant to be. We've got Voices from the Fortress, epic Christian fantasy of battles, brave hearts, and eternal truth. We've got Prepare Like the Bride. It's a devotional series with mini stories to go along with some songs. And then we've got Victorious, Beloved Daughter of the King novel coming soon. It's a hope-filled fiction for women discovering their true identity and walking in victory. I am Nicole Charles. I'm a storyteller, but I believe that God gave us an imagination, and it's one of the greatest gifts alive. I love building worlds that awaken wonder, writing characters who wrestle with real questions, and creating stories that leave readers thinking about Jesus long after they've turned the last page. So whether you're reading a Whisper Chronicle, you're following Crystal through the Voices from the Fortress, you're discovering identity with the Royal Identity series, or you're diving into one of my devotionals, welcome. I am so glad you're here. So walk beside me for the new Chronicles. Share a story with another traveler who needs a whisper of hope today. Visit any of the Fortress World, explore the books, free resources, and more kingdom adventures. And then tell me which whisper found you, because I love to hear from you. Every story is another doorway. Every doorway leads a little closer to the only King. If this chronicle has found its way into your hands, I hope you will receive it as it was given to me, with patience, wonder, and an open heart. When I began writing the Whisper Chronicles, I hoped these stories would do more than entertain. I prayed that they would remind us that the kingdom of God is often found in places the world overlooks. Not every miracle begins with thunder. Not every calling arrives with applause. Sometimes the most extraordinary things begin with a single, quiet act of obedience. As I wrote this second chronicle, I found myself thinking about all the people whose faithfulness has quietly shaped my own journey. The Sunday school teacher who kept showing up, the friend who faithfully prayed when no one else knew, the pastor who preached the truth year after year, whether the room was full or nearly empty, the parent who never stopped pointing their children towards Jesus. Most of them will never, ever have their names written in history books, but heaven knows every one of them. Perhaps you've wondered if the quiet things you do really matter. Maybe you've prayed the same prayer for years without seeing the answer. Maybe you've continued serving when no one seemed to notice, or chosen obedience when it would have been easier to walk away. If that's where you find yourself today, I hope this little chronicle encourages you. The King has never overlooked a faithful heart. Every act of obedience, no matter how small it may seem, becomes part of a story far greater than we can see. So slow down, read carefully, or listen. And perhaps somewhere between these pages, you'll discover that the light you've been tending has been part of the King's plan all along. So welcome back to the Whisper Chronicles. From the Journal of the Chronicler. There are lights the world celebrates. They shine from palace windows, crown towering cities, and draw crowds from every corner of the kingdom. Their brilliance is admired because they are impossible to ignore. Then there are quieter lights. a candle left burning in a widow's window, a shepherd's fire glowing beneath a sky full of stars, a lantern hanging from an old stone tower long forgotten by nearly everyone who passes below. These lights are seldom noticed, yet they often guide the travelers who need them most. Over many years, I have discovered that the king delights in entrusting his greatest work to those who simply remain faithful. They are not always the strongest, the wisest, or the most celebrated. More often, they are ordinary souls who choose, day after day, to obey even when they cannot yet see the purpose. This is the account of one such keeper, a man who inherited neither wealth nor glory, but a single lantern and one simple command: keep it burning. Many believed the flame had become nothing more than an old tradition. Only the king knew who was still searching for its light. Signed, the Chronicler. The Lantern Keeper. There were places the maps remembered, marked with careful lines and familiar names. And there were places that could only be found by those willing to trust old stories. Beyond the eastern hills, where the roads grew narrow and the forests swallowed the sounds of busy kingdoms, stood an ancient stone tower. It was neither grand nor beautiful. Moss clung to its weathered walls, ivy crept between the cracks, and the wind had worn its steps smooth with the passing of centuries. Travelers rarely came that way anymore, and those who did seldom stayed long enough to wonder why the tower had been built in the first place. Yet every evening, just as the sun began its slow descent behind the western mountains, a single lantern was lit in the highest window. He was an old man whose beard had turned the color of winter ash, and whose eyes carried the peculiar brightness of someone who had spent a lifetime listening more than speaking. Most dismissed him as nothing more than a harmless storyteller. But every now and then, travelers would linger by his porch, just long enough to hear one of his tales before continuing on their journey. Its warm light shone faithfully across the valley below, cutting through the darkness like a quiet promise. No one could remember when the lantern had first been lit, and the oldest stories spoke of a king who had entrusted the flame to the first keeper many generations ago. But with the passing of time, those stories had become little more than legends. Kingdoms had risen and fallen. Roads had changed. Families had forgotten. Only one tradition remained unchanged. When one lantern keeper grew old, another would take his place, climbing the narrow stone staircase each evening to tend the flame before nightfall. The newest keeper was a young man named Elias. He had not inherited riches, a title, or a castle. What he inherited was a key that unlocked the weathered tower door, a weathered journal filled with names of those who had served before him, and a simple instruction written in careful handwriting across the first page: keep the lantern burning until the king returns. No explanation followed. No map, no promise of when that day would come, only those few words. At first, Elias found joy in the work. Each morning he polished the lantern's glass until it gleamed in the sunlight. He gathered fresh oil from the small storehouse beside the tower and carefully trimmed the wick before evening arrived. As dusk settled over the valley, he climbed the winding staircase, unlocked the lantern's iron frame, and lit the flame that had been entrusted to his care. Then he would stand quietly beside the window, watching its gentle glow stretch across the hills as stars slowly appeared overhead. The work seemed holy. It seemed important. But as the months turned into years, questions began to whisper where confidence had once lived. Few travelers passed beneath the tower anymore. Most people preferred the newer roads that wound around the eastern hills. Those who occasionally stopped often smiled politely before asking the same question: why do you still keep that lantern burning? Elias would answer as he had been taught, because the king asked us to. Some nodded with respect, others laughed. The king, they would reply, no one has seen the king for generations. Surely, if he intended to return, he would have done so by now. At first, those words rolled away like rain from stone, but over time they lingered longer than Elias cared to admit. On quiet evenings, while the lantern flickered beside him and the valley lay silent below, he found himself staring into the darkness, wondering if anyone was still looking for its light. Winter came harder than any before it. Fierce winds swept across the hills, rattling the tower windows through the night. Snow buried the old road until it disappeared beneath a blanket of white. More than once, the lantern nearly went out, and Elias spent long hours shielding the fragile flame with trembling hands while icy drafts searched for every opening in the stone walls. There were nights when he questioned whether anyone would ever know the effort it took simply to keep the light alive. There were mornings when he wondered if obedience always felt this ordinary. Still, each evening he climbed the stairs. Still, he filled the lantern. Still, he lit the flame. One spring afternoon, an elderly woman from a nearby village climbed the hill carrying a basket of bread. She thanked Elias for his kindness over the years before gently asking the question that had quietly settled into many hearts. Have you ever thought about leaving? Elias looked toward the lantern resting beside the window. Sometimes. You could have a family, she said. You could build a home in the village. No one would blame you. You've done your part. He smiled kindly, but shook his head. The king never asked me how long it would take. He replied, he only asked me to keep the lantern burning. The woman nodded thoughtfully, though she could not fully understand. Neither could Elias, not yet. One evening, many years after he had first climbed the tower steps, a heavy fog settled over the valley. It was unlike any mist Elias had ever seen. It swallowed the hills, erased the road, and turned the world beyond the tower into a sea of white. Even the trees nearest the tower disappeared from view. For a moment, he wondered if lighting the lantern mattered at all. No one could possibly see it. Yet, habit born from faithfulness carried him forward. He filled the lamp, trimmed the wick, and touched the flame to the lantern once again. Its warm light pushed gently against the fog, not far, only enough to surround the tower itself. Then Elias waited. Hours passed. The night grew deeper. Just as he prepared to close the lantern for the evening, a faint sound drifted through the mist. A voice, then another. Moments later, 3 weary travelers emerged from the fog below, exhausted and covered in mud. They stumbled toward the tower with tears in their eyes. We thought we were lost forever, one of them whispered. The road disappeared hours ago. We had given up hope until we saw your light. Elias stood speechless. The travelers gathered around the lantern, warming themselves beside its glow, while sharing how they had wandered farther from the king's road than they had realized. Every landmark had vanished in the fog. Every direction seemed the same, except one, the lantern. It had become the only thing they could see. Only then did Elias understand. The lantern had never been lit because the tower needed light. It had always been lit because someone else would. Long after the travelers had continued safely on their journey, Elias remained standing beside the window. The valley below looked exactly as it always had. The road still wound quietly through the hills. The stars still filled the heavens above. Nothing about the landscape had changed. Only his understanding had. Faithfulness was never measured by how often it was noticed. The king had not asked him to keep the lantern because every evening would bring a traveler. He had asked him to keep it burning because one day someone would desperately need its light. As dawn painted the eastern sky with gold, Elias opened the old journal once more. Beneath the words written by the first keepers centuries before, he added a single sentence for those who would one day follow after him. The king never asks us to understand his timing. He only asks us to remain faithful until the light leads someone home. And so the lantern continued to burn, not because the keeper knew who was coming, not because he knew when they would arrive, but because the king had spoken, and that had always been enough. From the Journal of the Chronicler. Every light leaves a legacy. Every quiet act of faithfulness becomes part of a story the king is still writing. Elias never learned how many travelers would one day follow the lantern's glow. He was never asked to. The keeper's calling was not to count the footsteps, only to keep the light burning. Perhaps that is true for us as well. We seldom see all the lives our obedience touches. We rarely know how far a simple kindness travels, how long a faithful prayer lingers, or how one quiet decision to trust the King may guide another soul safely home. Yet heaven remembers every flame that was tended in love. Somewhere beyond the eastern hills, another lantern has been lit. Another traveler has begun the journey, and another chronicle is waiting to be discovered. Perhaps we shall follow its light together. Until the next chronicle, may your heart remain faithful, and may your lantern never grow dim. Signed, The Chronicler. The Whisper Chronicles, Volume 3, coming soon. The Forgotten Bridge. Somewhere beyond the whisper, where forgotten stones still remember the king's footsteps, an ancient bridge waits. Not every road leads home, but the king's always does. The next whisper is already waiting. Thank you for journeying with me through the Whisper Chronicles. These are stories of wonder, truths that endure, whispers that lead us back to the King. I'm Nicole Charles, storyteller, dreamer, and a lover of all things that point us to Jesus. Everything we've just read or listened to is a piece of a much greater world God has placed on my heart, the fortress world. There are different stories, different journeys, but one unwavering King. You can explore more voices from the Fortress. Voices from the Fortress, the series, the Christian fantasy series, Book 1, The Lion's Whisper. It's out, available on Amazon. You have the Royal Identity series, which is for young hearts learning who they always were meant to be. There's 3 books written. The first one is Crowned, the second one is Brave, and the third one is Chosen. Then we have Prepare Like a Bride. It's the devotional series. It's a devotional for the waiting, the hoping, and the becoming. They have micro stories in the front, little mini stories, and then devotionals in the back. They have 22 chapters and 2 original songs that go with it. And then, super excited, Victorious, Beloved Daughter of the King is coming soon. It's a hope-filled fiction for the everyday warrior. And of course, many, 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 many more to come. There are new whispers, new worlds, always pointing to Him. So if these stories encourage you, I would love for you to follow me all on social media, Facebook, Nicole Charles. My link tree is there. Share this with someone who needs to hear the whisper today, or save it so this journey won't leave you missing out. And connect with me. I would love to hear from you because your story matters. So let's walk this kingdom road together. And I cannot wait to see what He reveals next. So until the next chronicle, keep listening.